Welcome everyone to my webinar. My name's Kylie Welch and I'll be facilitating this webinar. I am an author and we are going through a book that I've written today, looking at the principles in regards to a book that I've written called In Honour of Grief. A little bit about me. I am an author, speaker, a coach, but I've also travelled and journeyed with grief for quite a long time, and I've learnt a lot about it. Before I understood grief, it would scare me a little bit when someone close to me passed away, because I would never know what to say. But now that I've journeyed with grief for a little while, and in honour of the people that I've lost that I miss, I became a funeral officiant, and so I've been a funeral officiant for about 10 years, and before that I was a wedding celebrant as well. So they both ends of the, we're celebrating weddings when we get married and celebrating life when our loved ones pass away. So I've often said to people that if I go through this life lesson and if I journey something in life, I'm likely going to write about it, and that's exactly what I've done here. So I've decided to create this webinar because this book has helped many people, and I've seen the way that it has settled their heart just reading through the principles and the journey that's within this book. So hopefully as we journey together in the next hour or so, this will also help you. So grief touches every life at some point, sadly. Hopefully not too early. It arrives uninvited. We never invited, but it's like a silent shadow that creeps into our days and settles into our hearts. It's the ache that comes from deep love, the pain that comes from profound loss. Grief's everywhere. It's universal, but it's also deeply and intensely personal. It's a journey that we all must walk at some point, hopefully not till later in life, but it is a journey that's uniquely our own. If you read my book, In Honour of Grief, you'll hear a story about how I sat with my friend Mary over a decade ago. She came to visit and she looked really sad, but I knew her well enough to know why she was feeling sad. She was really missing her dad, who had passed away not long beforehand, and also she was missing her mum. Her precious parents had both passed away, and so I do have a really lovely memory of sitting with her all those years ago, just sharing memories of her parents and talking about the journey that we'd been on with them. I knew her parents because my mum and her mum were best friends, as were my dad and their dad. They all got along really well. So I've grown up with my friend Mary, and what I realised that night and what I realised last week when my mum was in the hospital is that grief may turn up, but we're never ready for it, and our heart can't really comprehend it. All we can do is manage it, and hopefully manage it in a really healthy way, not like I did. There's a few times when I went through the grief journey and I didn't handle it very well, but I've learnt from that. It is for those of us who find ourselves questioning, doubting and struggling to make sense of the world once grief occurs, sometimes it feels like there's no way out. I wouldn't say there's a framework to grief, but there is a few things that I've put in my book that I want others to be aware of. Now, I know that there are diagrams online that talk about the different stages of grief, and that's not really what my book does. It kind of talks about the experiences I've had in those big topics, and then in this webinar, we look a little bit more closely into those. I guess the first thing to do as we start our webinar is just to talk about understanding grief. This is not a faith-filled webinar, but I am a person of faith, and I always believed that I'd be okay through any season of grief, and I thought that my faith would carry me like a shield, protecting me from the worst pain. But the journey of grief, which literally translates to intense sorrow, trouble, and annoyance, it's not something that can be predicted or neatly planned out. It doesn't come with a manual or a timeline, and it didn't ask for permission to come into my life, and it doesn't ask for permission to come into our lives. So understanding grief for me was really hard. It hit me like a train. I had a sense that was about to be something that was a part of my life when it first happened, but I didn't realize what I would do afterwards. The shock of what I experienced, the aftermath, I guess, of the week following, which is just a blur but also clear at the same time. And also the sense of responsibility of having to, believing that I had to be strong for other people. And that's where I went wrong, because in regards to feeling like I had to be strong for people, I buried my grief deep down inside, and that is incredibly toxic. It becomes something that I've called in my book toxic prolonged grief. So my experience, my very first experience of really grieving someone who I loved, I didn't do it very well. I didn't know how to do it. Nobody gives you a manual on how to deal with grief. I don't even know if there is one, except for books like mine and other really amazing books that have been published about grief. But there was no way that I knew how it was going to go in the decade afterwards. So I have experienced the loss of loved ones. I've experienced the loss of 100% health. I've experienced the loss of friendships, relationships, jobs, all the different kinds of grief. And that's what we'll be covering in this webinar today. But as I mentioned, the person we love or the thing we love may leave us, but our heart is never truly equipped to comprehend it. No matter how strong our faith is, no matter how much we trust in God or in our own selves, the human heart struggles to accept the reality of loss. The mind might understand that death is part of life, but the heart takes a lot longer to catch up. And that's when I started to think about grief as an uninvited guest. It arrives on your doorstep without warning. It does not politely knock before entering. It pushes through the door and it makes itself comfortable, bringing with it all the sorrow, trouble, annoyance that it pleases. It doesn't care if we're prepared or not. It simply demands to be felt, and that's its main job, I guess, is just demands to be felt and not ignored. But in that demand, I have learnt that there's an opportunity for something deeper. So, grief invites us to be honest with ourselves, to recognise that we're human, that we feel deeply because we have loved deeply. It reminds us that while the person that we love, or the thing, or the experience is no longer with us in the way that we used to, they do remain in our hearts. These things do remain in our hearts, in our memories, and in the very fabric of who we are. As I sat with my friend that night, I began to see that the journey of grief is not something that we can navigate alone. It's not something that we can isolate from, or it's not even something that we can rush through or sweep under the rug. We have to sit with that pain to honour the love that we had for that person, thing, or experience. And we have to trust that God is with us, even in our darkest valleys. If you're a person of faith, grief is not a sign of a lack of faith or a lack of strength, but rather it's a testament to the love that we have experienced and the connections that we've shaped our lives. That night I realised that being present with someone in their grief, not necessarily offering solutions, but just being there, can be one of the most powerful things we can do. It's in these moments of the quiet companionship where words may fall short, but the presence that we offer, or those that people offer us, speaks volumes. And then we begin to understand the true nature of grief. It's not something to be solved or fixed, but something to be witnessed and felt layer by layer, moment by moment, which is what we'll talk about in this webinar. That day with Mary, it taught me that grief is a journey that we must walk one step at a time, hand in hand with those that we love. Don't push people away. That's something that I did. And with God who sustains us, if you are a person of faith. It's a journey that has no shortcuts, but it's one that can lead to a deeper understanding of ourselves, of others, and of the God who promises that joy will come in the morning, even if the night feels unbearably long. So if you would like to join me in this webinar, please just continue to listen, to learn, and write notes, and I would love to hear your questions in the Q&A area afterwards.